Okay, is that better? That is better. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Are we ready?
Quiet!
Jamie! You have to wait for Jamie.
Wait for Jamie.
So, welcome everybody. My name is Diana Conway. I'm the president of this fabulous club, Women's Democratic Club. Thank you all for coming out. We're trying to have these events all over the county. If you have a suggestion for another venue, please let us know. And if this is too loud, somebody give me a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Perfect. Great.
We are going to hear from Jamie Raskin and then Mark Elrich, and then if she's here, Kate Stewart, this is her home turf. I also want to recognize Lorianne Sales is here from the city of Gaithersburg City Council. And Greg Wims from the Democratic Central Committee. And am I missing any other elected officials here? Okay, thank you. Before I turn it over to Jamie, I want to make a couple pitches, and I know you're all going to listen carefully while you chew quietly. The first one is you've got to join WDC. Two important reasons. The first is that when we go testify, it gives us the ability to say we represent umpty-ump hundreds of active women and men, and that makes a difference. Right after Mr. Trump got elected, we topped up. He won't be president for long, so we're Mr.
She's the president. She's the president.
Right after he got elected, we hit 700 members, and now the turnover is coming. A lot of people have lapsed, and we're asking you to re-up and hashtag Real Men Join WDC.
If you're a man.
And my predecessor.
I'll be quiet.
Okay. Just a couple quick announcements. We have tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. we are doing a tour of the County Women's Pre-Release Center. There is no state pre-release center for women in the entire state of Maryland. There's one at the county level, which is a model, and you can come see it tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for free. And it's at 11651 Nebel, N-E-B-E-L Street in Rockville. And you can see me after for that address again, 10 a.m. tomorrow. We also need your faces and your bodies at Tuesday 18th in Annapolis. The House Judiciary Committee is going to be considering the legislation related to opening a pre-release center for women in the state of Maryland. So that's 1 o'clock, Tuesday the 18th in Annapolis. You can carpool up there. It's really fun to see how the state level sausage is made. Annapolis Day, which gives you a much bigger view of the whole thing, is an event that we have for all our members. It's free for members. We get a free lunch. There is such a thing. We're going to visit the Senate. We're going to watch the Senate in session. We're going to visit our delegates and senators in their offices. They join us for lunch. You get to wander around the halls, and unlike the county council, they're all wandering the halls. You can corner them and talk to them. This is a save the date, March 23rd. March 23rd, we're having Senator Mark Warner join us for our luncheon. We don't have a venue yet, so the registration isn't open, but save March 23rd. And tentatively, April 2nd, Linda Foley from the County Democratic Central Committee and I and some others are scheming for a women's suffrage celebration.
Yeah.
We were going to have it on April 1st and say, just kidding, you don't get to vote. But, and there are a bunch of sign-ups on the table for getting involved with letter writing, get out the vote activities. Enid Light, our membership chair, is hosting an event Sunday in Bethesda 2 to 4. And also Tuesday 7 to 9. She's providing dinner on Tuesday, so come straight from work. And your friend Bill Conway and I are hosting one also on Sunday 1 to 3 in Potomac. Good snacks. Let's see, we are going to have a new member drawing at the end because happily a number of you have signed up as our new members, and our membership chairs always have a fun gift, so we'll have that at the end. And please just sign up for any of the activities that speak to you. I want to thank our video people, Ed Kimmel, who's back there somewhere with his flash camera, and the tireless Scott Weber, who's here doing video, photo, and I don't know what else. So I'm not going to introduce Jamie. He doesn't need an introduction, so off we go.
Let's hear it for our real president, Diana Conway. It's great to be with a president whose ethics and commitment are completely and totally unimpeachable, like you, Diana. I want to commend Diana and Leslie and Enid and Barbara. I don't know who all, the whole board, everybody who, Fran used the emeritus
Yes,
ex
best
officio, yeah. No, you guys are doing a fantastic, splendid, energetic, exuberant job running, energizing, catalyzing not just the Women's Democratic Club and not just the women of Montgomery County, but the women and the men and the kids of Montgomery County. So we could not do it without you. A big round of applause for our leaders here. Diana, I assume you're going to recognize all the elected officials and all the dignitaries, so you did do all that?
Yeah,
okay. All right, okay. So, hey, my chief of staff is here tonight. Do you guys know Julie Tagan? Say hello to Julie Tagan. Is Kathleen here too? Kathleen Connor, my district office director, is here tonight. Hello, Kathleen. So many great people. This gives me cheer. You know, my dad used to say, when everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. You're the hope. And I'm looking at the hope tonight. You're giving me hope. You're giving me sustenance. You're giving me moral nourishment. I bring you some good news, though, from Capitol Hill. My friends, today, the United States House of Representatives acted for the first time on the ERA in more than 30 years, and we voted to extend the deadline for the ERA so we can pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And yesterday, I don't know if any of our friends have come over the border, but the House Judiciary Committee voted for the first time, I think in 3 decades, to pass statehood for the District of Columbia. And that's some good news too, because if you strike a blow for democracy and political equality, for some people, it helps all of us, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And I said yesterday, I'm for a 2-state solution. I'm for Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Because I was watching that impeachment trial in the Senate, and I said, wouldn't it be pretty cool if we had 4 more senators representing 5 million disenfranchised Americans? So this is a matter of basic survival for the Republic now. Tocqueville said in Democracy in America, democracy is always either contracting and shrinking, or it's deepening and expanding. So the only question is, which way are we going to go, right? Which way are we going to go? So we've got to expand the democracy once we get through this unpleasantness with the Trump thing that's happening in the White House.
25th Amendment.
And there is the 25th Amendment, but we'll get to that. So let's see now. Somebody wanted me to make sure that even though we're all here only as ardent true blue Democrats, that I did invoke our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke about government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I'm glad to do that because what has kept us alive through the darkest period of our lifetimes? Really, when you think about it, what has kept us alive from the beginning? And it has not been the politicians, and as much as we love it, it's not MSNBC. And what has kept us alive is popular organizing from day one, the kind of organizing that's embodied in the Women's Democratic Club. And I always love to tell the story about how, for the rest of my life, I will mark the beginning of this extraordinary and literally unbelievable period that we're in. I will mark the beginning not as January 20th, 2017, And I don't know how many of you guys made it to the inauguration, but I could not make it myself that day. Remember, we went on a hike. I did. Any of you go on the hike with me when we went on a hike in
I went to the
Raskin?
Grand Canyon.
You went to the Grand Canyon. I watched the inaugural address at home on TV, and my reaction was, I liked it just fine. I think I would have preferred it in the original Russian that they'd sent it in. But for me, the period began not on January 20th, but the next day, January 21st, with the Great Women's March on Washington and across the country. That was the beginning of the whole thing. And you know, Kathleen, Julie, we organized, what, was it 27 buses that we went down? A lot of you came down with us. 30 buses from Silver Spring. We had 17 or 1,800 people. One of the greatest days of my life, really. It was a moment when we reasserted the proper relationship between the people and the government. Because in a democracy, the government only works for the people. The people are sovereign. The people are sovereign. I once read a great political science book called The Sleeping Sovereign about how under monarchy, when the king was asleep, there was someone who was assigned to be the wake sovereign while the real sovereign was asleep. And this book, The Sleeping Sovereign, was about how when in democracy people delegate power to the government, the people are still always sovereign. They might be asleep at one moment or not, and then the government is doing it. But you know what? When we had that march on Washington, the sleeping sovereign woke up in Washington and across America, really all over the world. The sleeping sovereign came awake. The first three beautiful words of the Constitution came alive. We the people, those of us who aspire and attain to public office are nothing but the servants of the people. We serve the public will in whatever capacity, whether it's county executive or county council or member of Congress or state senator or president of the United States. And the moment that we no longer behave as the servants of the people, but we think that we are the masters of the people, that we are above the law, that is the moment to evict, eject, reject, impeach, convict, remove, and start over again. Kick them out. Kick them out. We don't need them. This is our democracy. It belongs to the people. The government belongs to the people. The elections belong to the people. The elections do not belong to the president, and the elections do not belong to foreign powers that are dragged in order to slander and sabotage the campaigns of the president's opponents. The elections belong to the people. So anyway, I will never forget that great day. We were coming back from the march. It was a long day. Remember, I think we met, Kathleen, what was it, like 7 in the morning? Well, you were there like 6 in the morning. But it was a long day, and we were coming back, and our youngest daughter, Tabitha, was with us, and she said, "Daddy, what did you think?" I said, "It was like the greatest political day of my entire life." "What do you want to think?" She said, "Did you have no criticisms at all?" And so I said, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, there were no chants there about the emoluments clause." So the Tabitha said, "Daddy, nothing rhymes with the emoluments clause." And you know, I took that as a challenge, being an old school student protester. That's where I came up with, I think, my greatest chant of all time, which is, "Stop Trump, stop Pence, impeach them for emoluments." I mean, it's got the cadence, and it's just as good today as it was back on January 21st, 2017, maybe even better now. And I told Pelosi, when we impeach him for violating the emoluments clause, I want to be the chair of that team. Okay, I want to be the manager of that team. But anyway, look, whatever it is only been popular protest that has protected us. Remember, the weekend after that is when the president handed down his first racist, unconstitutional Muslim ban order, and we had tens of thousands of people spontaneously go out to the airports to protest and to stop them from violating people's rights as they tried to get back into the country. I don't even like going to airports to get on an airplane, and we spent the whole day out at Dulles Airport and at BWI to protect people. But at every step along the way, remember, they voted 62 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They did when they didn't have the power to do it, when President Obama was in office. Then, remember, in the 115th Congress, they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the White House. They could not vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act because hundreds of thousands of people across the country went to those town hall meetings and stopped them dead in their tracks. So every step along the way, as the attacks continue, as the assault on the rule of law continues, it has always been the people defending the Constitution, the people defending the rule of law, the mass protests demanding the end to the government shutdown, the official government shutdown last year at this time. Remember that one? It seems like it was like 10 years ago in Trump time, right? But that was just a year ago. Then they shut the government down. The whole administration is an attempt to shut the government down, except for the parts of it that are a money-making operation for Donald Trump and his family, his corporation, and his friends. So it's been the popular mobilization, and we threw what we had into the impeachment, and I will go to my grave knowing we did the right thing in impeaching Donald John Trump for his high crimes and misdemeanors against the people of the United States. And if anything, we didn't include enough of the high crimes and misdemeanors.
Thank you. Let's bring more.
And maybe we're not done yet. Maybe we're not done yet. And we do have a division, obviously, between the House and the Senate. The Republicans in the Senate did not behave like impartial jurors. They behaved like members of a religious cult.
Yes, they did. They violated their oath.
And the Republican Party now, when I think about it, the Republican Party to me is a mass religious cult surrounding and defending an organized crime family that has taken over the government of the United States. And unfortunately, that does not leave America in a class of one. On the contrary, when you look around the world, Donald Trump is in league with all of the despots and the dictators, the tyrants and the kleptocrats. Starting with the Home Office back in Moscow, Putin in Russia, and Orban in Hungary with his illiberal democracy, which is just mob rule and attacks on minorities and immigrants, El-Sisi in Egypt, Modi in India, Duterte in the Philippines, Netanyahu in Israel, North Korea's dictator, the Chinese government, all of the authoritarians and the right-wing despots and the corrupt autocrats, Erdogan in Turkey, all of them have found each other and they're all attacking liberal democracy. All of them. And so, what does that tell us? That our job is not just to defend democracy in the 8th District. It's not just to defend democracy in Montgomery County or in Maryland or even just in America. We're defending democracy on earth right now. It's back to the question that Abraham Lincoln asked on the Gettysburg battlefield when he said, whether government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall perish from the earth. You can feel that in your bones today. That's not a rhetorical question. That's not some kind of rhetorical flourish. He was asking that question. And we've got to ask ourselves that question too. Are you going to lie down and let the authoritarians and the despots and the criminals in high office today run all over everything that our forefathers and foremothers built? And that's the question for us. So the middle name of this great club is Democratic. And I am so proud to be a member of the Democratic Party today. So proud. Because who's standing up for democracy? We are. When the Republican Party now goes along with anything that Donald Trump does, anything, if he wakes up and he says, the dictator of North Korea is our best friend, he's our best friend. If he wakes up and he says, we're going to go to nuclear war against it, well, then they get behind him in line and they'll do that. They have suspended critical thought on their side.
Yes.
Except we should say a word for Mitt Romney, who did half of the right thing when he voted for the first article of impeachment. But it's our party. It's our party. And we got to teach our children the roots of our party. When the fascists and the Nazis were marching in Germany and across Europe, and some of them were marching in America, our party, under Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, stood up. And they didn't find very fine people on both sides, did they? They knew exactly which side we would be on, and we would be in the front of it. We would be leading the fight to defend democracy against authoritarianism and fascism all over the world. That's who we are. That's who we are in the Democratic Party. And we are the party of the civil rights movement. We took on the racists and Dixiecrats in our own party to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And LBJ correctly predicted, he said, we are going to lose the racists in the South for a generation. And we did, and it was worth it because we changed America.
Yes, thank you.
We changed America. We are the party of the women's movement. We are the party that's going to get the ERA done this year. We're going to do it. We are the party of the labor movement. We are the party of the peace movement. We are the party of the environmental movement. We are the party of the LGBTQ movement. We are the party of the civilizing movements of our history.
Yes.
That's who we are.
Yes.
And if they think that we're going to lie down and let a guy who may indeed be suffering from malignant narcissistic personality disorder, and everybody who follows him and walks the plank with him every day, everyone who walks over the edge of the cliff every day, if they think that we're going to allow them to destroy everything that prior generations of Americans have built, they've got something else coming in 2020. They don't understand who we are. They don't get who we are. 2020, my friends, I'm calling it the year of perfect vision. 2020, the year of perfect vision. And I get to bring out my favorite line in general for election years. But this is no normal election year, Diana. This is, every 2 years we go out, we say, hey, you guys, this is the most important election of our lifetime. Forget that. This is the most important election of our lifetime. This is it. This is it. Tell everybody. This is it. This is it. And I when I go out to the schools, I tell them everything that you need to know about driving is everything you need to know about voting. Everything you need to know about voting is everything that you need to know about driving and getting your driver's license. If you want to go forward, you put it in D. If you want to go backwards, you put it in R. Okay? Teach the kids that. And for their advanced seminar, you can teach them very simply, you've got a choice on the ballot. D for democracy, R for Russia. You make the choice. You decide which way to go. You got to check out this book I finished reading over the weekend. The title is unpronounceable in public, certainly with media here and everything. But the subtitle is Cambridge Analytica and the Plot to Break America by Christopher Wiley. Cambridge Analytica and the Plot to Break America. And it tells a remarkable story. Because everybody's walking around saying, America's so divided. We're so polarized. The feelings are so raw and so angry. My friends, that's a strategy. That's a plan. That's an agenda. That's not some melancholy fact of life, read this book. What will it tell you? Well, Cambridge Analytica gets together with Steve Bannon and all of Vladimir Putin's lieutenants that want to organize an attack on America. And Russia obviously can't defeat America militarily. We spend 10 times what they spend. Our military is 100 times more powerful than they are. They can't defeat us economically, not even close. They can't defeat us politically. They can't defeat us culturally. People still want to come to America. People love America and what the American people stand for and what we believe in the greatest multiracial, multi-religious, multi-ethnic liberal democracy that's ever existed. That's who we are. So you can't beat us on any of that. So what can Putin beat us on? This authoritarian despot, former head of the KGB, kleptocrat who stole all of the funds, all of the money from the people of Russia and handed it off to these oligarchs. Well, how could he beat us? He said, we're going to create a Manhattan Project for the internet.
Yep.
And we're going to figure out how to use all of this data and information that Facebook has, that Google has, all of this data to get into people's minds. We're going to figure out how to invade people's societies through propaganda. And we're going to inject poison, racial, ethnic, religious, partisan, ideological poison into America and to these other countries. And we're going to propagandize for Brexit. We're going to push Brexit. And nobody's going to know what hit them. And the people at Cambridge Analytica, you got to read this book about these, most of them were like kids in their 20s with, purple hair, and they were data geeks and computer geniuses. But what did they figure out? Well, they did socio-demographic analysis of the population. They found 2.5% of the people could be vulnerable to a really dark fascistic appeal. And these people demonstrated what they called the dark triad, or the devil's triad, of 3 different emotional tendencies. Okay? Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Okay? And so that's a small part of the population, but it's millions of people. And they said, we're going to find these people, we're going to bombard them with messages, we're going to propagandize them, we're going to activate them. And what do you know? We get the election of 2016, we get neo-Nazis and Klansmen marching in the great cities of America, we get racial and ethnic violence spiraling out of control all over America, and people walking around bemoaning the divisiveness and the polarization. So I will not fall prey to the polarization and the divisiveness, because that's Vladimir Putin's plan, and I'm not going to be part of that. And we're not going to be part of that. We're going to stand up for everybody in America. Everybody. And I want you to just think about this, because I've been thinking a lot about the whole partisanship thing, and thinking about what we do in our office. We've got the most amazing staff for the Maryland's 8th Congressional District. Amazing staff, and we solve people's problems every single day. But if you call our district office and you got a problem with your VA benefits, you got a problem with Social Security, you got a problem with Medicare or Medicaid, you want to try to figure out how to do something locally, whatever it is, we will go to work for you. And you know what we never ask you? Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican or independent? We ask only, do you live in the 8th District? Because we're only allowed to work for people in the 8th. So, and we go to work for you. And I try to take that mentality from my district office to Congress. So when I think about when we're passing legislation, I don't think, is the ERA going to help Democrats? Or I don't think, is this Medicare plan going to help Democrats? I try to ask myself, is it going to help everyone? Is it going to help all of us? The political party system is great for elections. The alternative to it is a one-party dictatorship. We don't want that. We want party competition. That's healthy. The parties articulate programs, and we go out, we mobilize the voters, we recruit people to get involved. But when we get in, we got to remember what George Washington used to say, which is that party comes from the French word parti. It's a part. Our party is just a part of the whole. And we got to try to think about the whole. So we're going to win this election. We're going to win it big. We're going to win it really big. But we're not going to just win it for our party. We're going to win it for America. And we're going to win it for the whole world. And I know we're going to win it. You know, Hillary beat Donald Trump in 2016 by more than 3 million votes. In 2018, because of the efforts of people in this room, and rooms all alike across the country, we won back the House of Representatives 235 to 200. We beat them by 9 million votes. We won in 2016 by 3 million. We won by 9 million votes in 2018. In 2020, let's win by 15 million votes. Let's win by 20 million votes. We are going to see a landslide victory for America, for our Constitution, for our values, for the dream of a country that overcomes, that transcends the racial and ethnic tribalism that they're trying to sell to us from all of the autocracies all over the earth. I'm going to leave you guys with the words of some people I've held close to my heart, including Mary McLeod Bethune, who said, if we show the courage and the fortitude of our ancestors, then we will be able to do for our time what they did for theirs. How's that? We've got that opportunity. The great Frederick Douglass, born an hour away at the Wye River Plantation, who escaped from slavery to become our leading abolitionist freedom fighter, a fellow Marylander, and he wrote, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be moral, it may be physical, it may be moral and physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. A message to you from a fellow Marylander in the 19th century, and I leave you finally with the words of the great Tom Paine, who came over to join us in our revolution against the autocrats and the theocrats and the tyrants and the dictators. And in 1776, he wrote this beautiful pamphlet called The Crisis. And it was a tough time, and people didn't know which way things were going to go. And could you really create a democracy on a popular principle and beat the kings and beat the monarchs? And a lot of people were saying it's not going to work, and they were drifting away and defecting. And you hear stuff you hear today, like, what's the message, and who's our messenger, and we're too messy, we got too many voices, and let's pull it together. So he wanted to write a pamphlet and to unify people based on ideas. And he said these imperishable words. I've updated the language at the suggestion of Speaker Pelosi, just so it doesn't offend our modern sensibilities. But he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. These are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country, but everyone who stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Yeah. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation: the more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end is our victory. That victory will be ours in 2020. Thank you, Women's Democratic Club, for everything you're doing. Thank you.
I'm never surprised, but I'm always surprised. It's great. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Before we move to our next speaker, which is Mark Elrich, I just want to point out, I met Mark probably 10 or 15 years ago. He was 15, 20? He was one of the first council members who listened to me and introduced me to staff, Debbie Spielberg, who I think many of you know, and helped me advocate on issues that I cared about. I didn't know what the county council was. I didn't know where the pieces were. Mark was one of the first people to help me and show where they were. Please help me in welcoming our county executive, Mark Elrich.
So, God, I may learn how to use this microphone. First of all, I'm really happy to be here. Really happy to see a room full of people on a Thursday night. This is a good thing. I'm a little stylistically different than Jamie. I will say, I was thinking about one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Jefferson. And after he lays out in the Declaration of Independence the purpose of people coming together and what a government ought to be, he says, it is when a government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish it. And that's a fundamental human right. And I think we're in really troubled times. And it's not going to be enough to just somehow think we changed the personnel without thinking about deeper changes. Getting rid of the Electoral College might be a really good thing. Considering economic rights to be human rights, to the stuff that Roosevelt was talking about when he talked about the Second Bill of Rights right before he died, and had a vision for America which was far broader than where we are today. And I think about Roosevelt as kind of like the guidepost in American politics for me. In my mind, he was the last great American president, and he stands above pretty much everybody else, and he had a real vision for America. And I continue to be concerned that our demonstrations are too few and too far in between. Yep. I look at European political parties, they could fill the streets. The Democratic Party can fill a room. It can't fill a street. The marches on Washington were not products of a party that can mobilize a base. The marches on Washington were by the base that got fed up with the politics of Washington. And we've got to find a way, in my mind, to transform the Democratic Party into a truly, and I mean in the best sense of the word, a populist party. Populism didn't used to be a dirty word. Populism used to be about party or about a belief that rebelled against the establishment. And it talked about people's rights rather than corporate rights. And we need a party that is clear about where it stands and where it has stood. And, the Democratic Party is probably the best party since 1960. But it's depressing to read in the 50s that the Republican platform in some ways had things that the Democratic platform didn't talk about. And we are the party of the Civil Rights Movement. We're also the party of the wrong side of the Civil War. We are all those things. We've evolved. And I think we've got to be able to talk about where we were, where we came from, and where we are, because it's wrong for people to think things were always like this. And I was a school teacher, and it always concerned me with the desire to focus on the moment and not talk about how we got to the moment. Because if you don't talk about how we got to the moment, you don't understand the struggle and the blood, sweat, and tears that got us here. You don't read about, and you don't think about the Union leaders who were assassinated. You don't think about the black advocates in the 60s who were assassinated. We assume all these things are the way they are. And as a school teacher, the danger was that my students would think about the world and say, well, it's always like this. And if you think it's always like this, you don't appreciate the work that was done to get it here. And frankly, you don't understand the forces that time and time again have aligned on the wrong side of the struggle. You forget that. Corporate America writes nice checks on occasion, they say nice things on the occasion, but when we were growing up, they were on the wrong side of the women's movement, the wrong side of the civil rights movement, the wrong side of the anti-war movement, Every decent thing that we got done in this country, corporate America was frankly on the wrong side of. And now they can write checks and they can get accolades from people, and it's like, well, you know, they're just our brothers and sisters. I'm not going to discuss presidential politics. I'm with everybody else in this room. I am voting for whoever the Democratic candidate is. But I will say what my fear is. If the Democratic candidate who wins is not a candidate who will bring forward change, then we are going to bounce back and forth between Democrats and Republicans for a long time, because people went to Trump because they were not satisfied. They did not trust the leadership that we put in front of them, and they went someplace else. We cannot afford not to lead this time. We can't afford to dither on the environment, on labor rights, on America's position in the world. We've got to be sure we're on the right side. We can't be assassinating people. I mean, drone strikes aren't Trump's invention. They come from someplace else. The antagonism, the angering of people around the world about things this country's done isn't Trump's invention. A lot of that stuff predates him. So we've got to think about how we lead differently and how we get things done. We need, and Jamie, I trust your leadership in the House, we need policies that economically liberate the American people. We need a new deal. We need a better deal than what we've got. I'm a believer in single-payer health care. And I do not understand for the life of me how somebody can say single-payer will not be cheaper than the current system when you get rid of all the insurance company and people who are nothing but parasites and produce no health care. What has an insurance company ever done for American health care except tell you, you can't get coverage for this, I'm not covering that medicine, I'm not covering that procedure, it's not worth the investment. The insurance companies are not our friends. They do not provide health care, and they're an enormous cost and a drag on our system. We at some point have to come to grips with this stuff. We cannot make deals with big pharma and big hospitals that wind up, and I wish my ex were here, Karen, when I listen to her talk about what she deals with on prescriptions, and the fact that the prescription her doctor tried to get her isn't on the formulary for the drug company that she can get her drugs from, and so she can't get what her doctor was prescribed except for $400 a month. And I think about visiting my son in Columbia, and not Columbia, Maryland, but Columbia, South America, and I could walk into a pharmacy in Medellin, and I could buy a drug for a fraction of the price, without a prescription, for somebody buying drugs for diabetes in the United States. There is something fundamentally wrong, and we've got to be willing to talk about it. I don't want to lose to Trump. I cannot imagine another 4 years of this monster, and I can't imagine another 4 years of Republican Senate. This has got to come to an end. But this party, if we learn anything, if we win, we have to build the base that we can mobilize, we have to build a base that believes in us, and we have to be able to be on the street like they're able to be on the street. We've got to be able to reach out to working class people who are disillusioned. I mean, I can handle my taxes, I can handle my health care. There are a lot of people who can't handle the taxes, can't handle health care. They don't believe that we were there for them. They really don't. And that's why I think this party got in trouble with the working class. They used to be our class. I mean, it wasn't that long. We counted on the union voters in this country to deliver the states. They're not there. They're not there because the Republicans gave them a better deal. They have a sense of betrayal. I talked to my girlfriend's friends up in Western Maryland who were miners and used to be Democratic Party supporters and hate the coal companies. When I talk about democratic socialism, they sound like me. They don't have any problem with it, but they just don't think the party's going to do anything. So the Republicans appeal to their fear, they appeal to their prejudices, and it's like, well, if I can't get anything but my fear and prejudices satisfied, that's better than getting nothing satisfied. So we've got to find a way. We need a better message, we need to do better work at the grassroots, and we really need to lead. I am optimistic about the possibilities, but I tell people, if the first thing I read in the morning is my science feed. I do not read the news. The news is too damn depressing. I go to the science, because the science, if you look at what people are capable of doing, when I think about the biotech industry in Montgomery County that I've gotten to know really well, I think about what they're doing and the changes they're making and what human beings are capable of doing. It inspires me because it gives me a sense of what the human race is possible for us. And I start out with that because I feel like this is really cool. We're actually amazingly potential. Then I deal with the news, and then I start thinking, oh, here's the news, same old nonsense again. But I think we've got to find a way to believe in our future, to believe in ourselves, to feel like we can actually do something better. I was not a huge fan of John Kennedy, but I got to say, this idea of saying we could go to the moon, and that we have a mission, and this is what America's going to show. We need to inspire that in people again, not just the going to the moon part, but the idea that America can achieve great things and do great things. There's nobody calling us to greatness. Trump doesn't call us to greatness, he calls us to fear. The answer to a call for fear is, in my mind, ought to be a call for all of us to be the best and most that we can be. And we've got to talk about that. We've got to find a way to appeal to working class people. And we've got to turn this party into a machine that when things don't go right, we put people in the streets and say, we're not going to take it. What was that movie where the newspaper editor or TV editor gets at network? And he said, we're not going to take this anymore. I mean, it is amazing to me that the Americans have allowed this erosion of democracy. And I'm going to close by telling you about my little trip to Berlin this summer. I went to it's the landscape of terror. If you've ever been to Berlin, it's on the grounds of the former SS, and it's a display about the Holocaust and what led to Hitler's rise. And I'm going from beginning to end, and I'm thinking, somebody else read this playbook. It looked like America. It sounded like America. Every damn thing that bastard did, you could find on that wall, and you could see what they built. The only thing that Trump hasn't done is burn down the congressional headquarters, the Reichstag, which is what Hitler did. They haven't burned that down yet. But pretty much all the path there is out there laid out. And the German people sat there and they're like, this is going to end. This is going to end. This is going to end. Until not only didn't it end, but they had no ability to reverse it. And I worry that we keep saying this is going to end, this is going to end. We don't have to stand up and fight. We'll vote this thing out. I think we've got to show our presence, we've got to show our force, and I think it's possible. I'm a believer in change, and I do not want my grandkids to have to endure a world that's going to be shaped anymore by Donald Trump. So let's get this November thing over with. Let's bring back the Senate so we can actually pass legislation, and then let's do something with it so that we're not looking at people 4 years from now and trying to explain why we had a majority and didn't get things done. We get the majority this time. Let's do the unfinished work of a Roosevelt. Let's think about what another Bill of Rights ought to look like, and let's make it real for America. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I want to also ask everybody to give a round of applause to Ada Villatoro, whose restaurant this is. Ada, are you here? This is a home for many great civic occasions. All right, go back to the happy hour. Thank you, everybody.